We've now had a few days in Season 6 of DMZ, what might be the last season of DMZ ever, so I thought this would be a good time to just kind of take a step back and have a look at the state of DMZ. What are the games like at the moment, how are people playing, and what does the future look like for the mode? Now, when I say it might be the last season of DMZ, I really do mean might. Like, I don't think anyone really has any idea what the future of DMZ is going to be when Modern Warfare 3 comes out. While I know there's lots of people that really enjoy the mode, probably a lot of people who don't really enjoy Battle Royale or multiplayer, people who maybe aren't that keen on zombies, I think it's quite a small number of people compared to like the overall size of the Call of Duty community. And with a game as big and expensive as Call of Duty, for something to become a main mode like Warzone did, I really think it has to be huge. I think it has to knock it out of the park, and I don't think DMZ necessarily did that. It is also kind of interesting that this is the first season we haven't had anything new for DMZ, anything that's unique to DMZ at all. And now I know at the beginning of the season we haven't really had anything in Warzone either. There's just the new weapons and the battle pass, and then a few patches and things like that. And we'll talk about that later. But there's no new content for either Battle Royale or DMZ. But then later in the season, in the mid-season update with the Haunting, which looks amazing, all of that stuff was announced as being kind of for Battle Royale, like for those modes. And obviously we've got Von Dead, we've got Zombie Royale, all of that kind of thing. And then there was just a couple of paragraphs in the blog saying, and all of this stuff is coming to DMZ too. And the cynical part of me feels a bit like maybe they're just making big changes to the map for all the Haunting stuff, and it's more effort than it's worth to separate out the DMZ version of the map and the Battle Royale version of the map. So they thought, oh, screw it, let's just put all of it in DMZ. It will be interesting to see whether we get actual like new missions or upgrade challenges or things like that for DMZ based on all of the zombie stuff and all of the Haunting things. I hope so, I really do, but I kind of feel like maybe we're not. And of course, another part of the kind of negative news for DMZ is that with all of the talk about COD Next, all of the talk about Modern Warfare 3, we haven't had any mentions of DMZ whatsoever. I did reach out to my Activision contact and asked if they could say anything about it, and they just said no, basically, that they can't say anything about it. They don't have anything to tell us about it. So while they haven't outright said that DMZ is going away, it does feel a little bit weird that, you know, with Battle Royale, we know we're getting a new map, and we know that there's going to be something about it at COD Next, which is where I think DMZ was shown off for the first time last year. But with COD Next, we haven't had any kind of indication that there's anything going on for DMZ at all. So I really do kind of think this is probably the final season for DMZ. At least for now. It could potentially come back next year or in the future sometime, maybe next time Infinity Ward do a game. On that note, I don't actually know which development studio works on this. Obviously with Call of Duty, all of the development studios kind of help out with each other and they collaborate on things. But generally you kind of know, okay, this campaign was created by Infinity Ward, this multiplayer was created by Infinity Ward, this part of it was created by Sledgehammer, you know some of the Warzone maps were created by Raven or High Moon or Beanox or Toys for Bob, and then you know that like ranked play in Zombies has been created by Treyarch. With DMZ, I still don't think a studio have kind of come out and said, we're the ones that have been doing this, we're the ones that have been working on this. Whether that's Infinity Ward or Raven, I assume it's probably one of them, but I don't know. So anyway, enough negativity about the future and at least what we don't know about the future. What's the game like right now? The biggest change that came with Season 6, at least in my mind, was that they removed 6-man teams. And this was a massive thing. This was something I've been wanting for absolutely ages. I really hated the assimilating up to 6-man teams because obviously it could potentially lead to pre-mades where you've got 2 teams of 3 that know each other and they try to get in a game together so they can immediately form a team of 6 and then go around hunting other players. Personally, I think I've only ever seen that happen maybe once or twice, and even then I'm not sure. I really don't think it was quite the plague that some players thought it was. I think lots of people just see a team of 6 early on in the game and assume that they're pre-made if they're not talking on comms or something like that. But I've been in plenty of those 6-man teams at the beginning of games where just 2 teams of 3 ran into each other very, very early on. One team killed the other team, accepted all of their pleas, assimilated them, and then just carried on going around together, pinging and stuff like that, but hardly ever talking, especially on EU servers. It's fairly rare that people talk to each other a lot over comms, I think because there's so many language barriers. You know, especially if you're playing in the morning like I do. I get lots and lots of other players who are in France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, Italy. You get lots of players from all over Europe, and often there's big language barriers, so they usually end up just kind of communicating via pings and things like that. But obviously, from the perspective of a player that suddenly sees a 6-man team come over the hill and then kill them without using voice comms, it's very easy to jump to the conclusion that they must have been a pre-made. But regardless of whether they're pre-made or not, it just made fights feel unfair. Normally when I play DMZ, I'm either playing solo or I'm playing in a duo. And that's just pretty much because I like playing with people who I can communicate with, who I get on with. So either I'm playing by myself, or if I'm playing with Flynn, it's just the two of us. Occasionally we have randoms in the group, but we're not really sort of playing with them as such. We don't communicate with them that much, and often they'll go do their own thing. So when we are a duo, I'm happy to admit that that's going to make the game harder for us. Like, that's going to make things more difficult. Or if I'm solo, it's going to be super difficult, because if I'm fighting against a team of 3, they're going to have an advantage. Once you put it up to a team of 6, though, that advantage becomes almost impossible. Obviously, it's great. Like, we've had some amazing stories and adventures where 6-man teams have attacked us and we've managed to fight them when I've been solo or when I've been in a duo, and that's amazing. But I would say that probably happens like 5% of the time. The other sort of 19 out of 20 times, the 6-man team will absolutely storm over us. Or like, they'll attack us, we'll manage to kill 2 or 3 or 4 of them, but then there's 2 more coming in, and you just don't have enough ammo, you don't have enough people to try and kind of, you know, watch all of the different entrances, etc. You don't have enough plates, and you end up getting taken out. That problem is much worse on the smaller maps, like Koshai Complex especially, but even Ashika and Vondel really, where there's maybe less opportunity to escape, less opportunity to avoid people, and it's much, much easier for those teams to find you. Plus, I think a lot of the time, because these teams aren't pre-made usually, at least I'd say 99% of the time they're not pre-made, if they're not communicating very much, it's easier for them to hunt players than it is for them to do anything else. You know, what are the odds that they're all going to be on the same mission, or they're all going to be interested in doing the same missions? The one thing that pretty much everybody is kind of interested in doing is fighting other players and trying to get loot from them. So it's like an easy thing for them to do. So when you had the 6-man squads, you'd often find people just hunting other players, because that's the only thing that all of the team could agree on doing. So for ages, I thought the way of fixing this was just to reduce it down to 4-man. I thought that's a good number. You can have a 3-man squad, and then if there's a solo, they still have a chance of getting assimilated. There's still a chance of assimilation in general when you're fighting, although obviously you and your friend won't get assimilated. But, you know, at least maybe you'll get assimilated out of your team if you're a lucky one. So it's still a chance, it's still possible for you to come back out of a fight without losing all of your stuff, but it's much less likely. Well, that's what they've done. They've made that change. Now you can only assimilate up to a 4-man team. You can't do any more than that. And it has changed the game dramatically. I definitely think there's a lot less big teams hunting people. I've found myself overwhelmed a lot less. Like, fighting a 4-man team is much, much easier than fighting a 6-man team. But I think it's had another weird effect, and that's that the game just feels so much quieter. Like, I don't know if it's just me. I've been playing DMZ just in the mornings for the last 2 days, so I haven't played in the evening or anything like that. But in the mornings, DMZ has felt bizarrely empty for a couple of days now. So I still have managed to get into a couple of team fights. Like you can see here, we were fighting a team just near airport. But it feels like it happens much more rarely than it did before. And I'm not really sure why that is. Is it just that previously there were 6-man teams and they would roam around the map, they'd be super confident, they'd be traveling around loads, and that meant that you'd see them a lot more? Is it just that now when players die, they tend to leave the game because they're less likely to get assimilated? So whereas before, pretty much everyone would get kind of 2 lives, you know, you'd get killed once, then get assimilated, and then you had a chance to live again. Now a lot of those people are just quitting, so there's just less people in the games later on. Or is there something else going on? Now, I kind of think there's 2 sides to this. One side is that I think now teams aren't going into teams of 6. They're a lot more reluctant to fight other teams. Like, now you don't have the idea that, oh, you can fight another team at the beginning, and if you lose, it doesn't really matter, because they'll probably pick you up and then you'll just go around as a 6-man. Now it's much less likely that you're going to get picked up. I think there's a lot of people going back to doing missions instead. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of scared to do PvP because there's a chance they'll lose so much. And so they're just avoiding it altogether. So where I'm not finding other teams, it's more because other teams are just hiding. Other teams are trying not to get involved in the fight in the first place. But I also think it goes further than that. I think there's something else going on. I think there's less people in the games. Now, I don't know this for sure, and obviously I don't get to see any numbers or any server stats or anything like that, but there's been plenty of times in games in the last couple of days where we've gone over to where another team should spawn, in theory, and there just hasn't been anyone there, like, at all. And when we've been into Koshai Complex in the last few days before the patch, like, over in the last few days of Season 5, there were plenty of times where we went into Koshai Complex, and I don't think there was anyone in the entire complex at all. I think DMZ's population might actually just be dying. I think it might be struggling to fill up lobbies. Now, if you go into Ashika or you go into Vondel, this doesn't seem to be much of a big deal. I think there's only like 6 teams on those maps anyway, so maybe it's just easier for them to fill lobbies with that. But on Al Mazrah, for whatever reason, it just feels super, super quiet. And I've gone for entire games where we haven't tried to be quiet, we've made a load of noise, we've gone around different areas, and I just haven't seen another player at all. We just see bots, and that's kind of boring. For some people, I think this is going to be music to their ears. I think there's some people that absolutely love just fighting bots in DMZ. They don't want to see other players, they don't want to fight other players, and when they do fight other players, they want it to be kind of rare, they want it to be something unusual. And for them, this is probably great. For me, I've kind of done all of the missions, or at least I've done all of the missions that I want to do. I'm now just doing the upgrade things, where it's just like, pick up 30 cigarette lighters and things like that, which I'm not massively interested in, I don't find very exciting. I mostly want to get into interactions with other players. I want to get into fights with other players. I want to get talking to other players. That makes the game fun for me. And right now, I'm really, really struggling to find people. And that's really the biggest difference for Season 6. Now, there are some other big things. I mean, like, there's the new Lockwood build. If you haven't checked out my video on it, you really need to, because I'm fairly sure they're going to patch this soon. There's a Lockwood build that is absolutely insane and can one-shot people. That's making some fights quite fun from my perspective when I'm fighting people. You know, it's giving me the chance to go fight teams of 2 or 3 or 4 by myself. But I imagine for the people who are on the receiving end of it, who walk around a corner, then just instantly die and lose all of their stuff because of it, it's probably not that much fun. So the link to that video should be on your screen now. Let me know in the comments what you think of Season 6 so far. Have you been having a good time? Have you been enjoying it? Does it feel weirdly quiet to you? Or have you had a completely different experience? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.